Part 11. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Se Nian Bai. Chapter 101. Everyone has his own job. While Su Ming and the Wolf King were talking, Wang Jianxi was also reviewing documents in the office. The secretary knocked on the door and put a stack of materials on the corner of Wang Jianxi's desk, saying, "Director Wang, District Chief Li asked me to send you the model worker materials. This year, their district has a total of 10 model workers, and more than 100 have been reported. These 19 people are related to our agriculture, forestry, and fishery." "Well, I see. I'll take a look. You can come and get it this afternoon." "Oh no, tomorrow morning," Wang Jianxi said without raising his head. There are many aspects involved in doing things in the government. For example, the election of district model workers is a matter of great learning. The evaluation of model workers is not decided by one person, and all aspects must be taken into consideration. For example, Wang Jianxi is from the Municipal Bureau. He is in charge of the agriculture, forestry, and fishery of the entire Yangchuan city, but he does not specifically manage the work of a certain district. In the end, the district model workers are still determined by the district leadership team, but when it comes to agriculture, forestry, and fishery, Wang Jianxi's opinion must be sought. To put it bluntly, among the 10 places, 2 are for agriculture, forestry, and fishery, and these 2 places will be selected by Wang Jianxi. Wang Jianxi is very busy now. He has to manage his daily work and care about the work of the Yangtze River Porpoise Protection Group. He is busy from morning to night and never stops until he is about to get off work. He rubs his temples, leans back in his office chair, and picks up the model worker candidate materials sent by his secretary to read. Li Minjiao, Deputy Director of the Municipal Park. Bai Tao, Director of the Shipbuilding Institute. After looking at several candidates in a row, none of them are suitable. These people either have been model workers for several consecutive years. It is meaningless to be evaluated as a model worker again, and it is easy to be criticized, or they really have no achievements that can be mentioned and cannot convince the public. There are also some people who are quite suitable, but unfortunately the number of places is limited and it is impossible to take care of everyone. Zhou Jin, General Manager of Huading Fishery Company, provides nearly 1,000 tons of fish products to the fishery market of the whole province every year. It is the largest freshwater fish farmer and supplier in Yangchuan City, with an annual profit and tax of 1 million yuan. There are many private enterprises with tax revenue of 1 million yuan, but the agriculture, forestry, and fishery industries are relatively less profitable. Those who can achieve a tax revenue of 1 million yuan are definitely giants in the industry. As the supervisor, Wang Jianxi and Zhou Jin have had some dealings and are considered acquainted. The impression Zhou Jin gave Wang Jianxi was that he was a kind of uneducated, capable, ambitious, or aspiring grassroots person. He always wanted to get an official position, and he was involved in various activities and followed Wang Jianxi's path. However, Wang Jianxi has always been a stable official and never did anything illegal, which can be seen from the fact that he only bought a small winged tiger for Wang Hao. Besides, the country's anti-corruption efforts are very strong, and Wang Jianxi dare not mess around. This time, the finless porpoise was also found in Huading Reservoir. For this, Zhou Jin had several broken ribs. Although he had no merit, he had worked hard. Giving him a model worker title was a way for his superiors to comfort him. Wang Jianxi thought about it and drew a circle in the upper right corner of the list, indicating that this person could take up a place. Then he looked down and when he turned to the last person, Wang Jianxi suddenly raised his mouth and couldn't help laughing. The young man with a sunny smile in the photo was Su Ming. Wang Jianxi considered it and drew a half circle in the upper right corner of Su Ming's list, and then drew another half circle on the other 2 people's places. A circle means that Wang Jianxi recommends this person to be a model worker, a half circle means that Director Wang recognizes this person, but whether to give this person the title of model worker is up to the district leadership team. The quota is very tight. Although Su Ming has some merits, the people who can be reported are not ordinary people, and each has their own merits. After all, Su Ming has too little experience and is too young. Moreover, after the Yangtze River dolphin incident, he was promoted, given bonuses, and all the rewards had been given. If the title of model worker was given to Su Ming before there were any new major achievements, although the district would agree to it for Wang Jianxi's sake, it would be too obvious, as if Wang Jianxi was eager to promote Su Ming. Old Wang is now highly regarded by the deputy mayor above, and is in a critical period of promotion to the municipal party committee leadership team. At this time, the most important thing is stability. In this case, if another leader were to change, Su Ming would not be considered at all. Because of the Yangtze River dolphin incident and the relationship between Su Ming and Wang Hao, Wang Jianxi finally drew a half circle and gave the decision-making power to the district leadership team. The district had just decided on 7 model workers, and 3 were to be decided. When there was still more than half a month before the announcement of the commendation, the model worker candidates were communicated. Brother Joe, if you ask me, it's better to give him some money. Model workers are useless, the bald man who came to visit Zhou Jin in the First People's Hospital complained while peeling an apple. Zhou Jin was lying on the hospital bed and couldn't move for the time being, but his complexion was much better. He was lucky. The last time he watched TV, Zhou Jin was so angry with Su Ming that he vomited blood. Unexpectedly, it was a blessing in disguise. After the doctor rescued him, he said that the blood stasis in his chest had dispersed, and the spitting out of the blood would help him recover. You know shit, Zhou Jin cursed, model workers are away, do you know? What way? The bald man was good at fighting, but talking to him about politics was like playing the lute to a cow. Forget it, you won't understand even if I tell you. Zhou Jin let out a long breath, suppressed his anger, and told himself to treat the bald man as a pig, and never get angry again at this time. Becoming a model worker is the first step. If he can take advantage of this favorable wind and find a way to go further, it will be of great help to his business in the future. He directly instructed the bald man, go and apply for a few cards, also, help me make an appointment with Director He. If he is free, drive him to the hospital. I have something to say to him. The bald man nodded, oh. But will Director He help? Zhou Jin frowned. Director He is a very cunning person. He usually smiles when dealing with anyone and doesn't offend anyone. He has asked him for a few small favors before, so he is considered an acquaintance. But Zhou Jin has no idea how much Director He can help. Strictly speaking, Zhou Jin and Director He are not close friends. The few favors he asked him for before were not against the principle. He just urged the specific people who were in charge. As the string of the national legal system construction is getting tighter and tighter, Zhou Jin is not sure whether Director He is willing to help him. But this Director He was the highest ranking official Zhou Jin knew, and he was directly in charge of him. Zhou Jin couldn't think of anyone else to look for other than Director He. Okay, I'll do it, the bald man said, and took a bite of the peeled apple, eating it with relish. The bald man sat next to Zhou Jin and peeled an apple for a long time. Zhou Jin thought it was for him to eat. At first, he was a little touched, thinking that although this guy was stupid, he was still a little humane and knew to care about me. But he never expected that the bald man didn't mean that at all. Zhou Jin's eyes suddenly widened, this apple. Huh? Brother Zhou, you want to eat an apple? You should have said it earlier, the bald man asked with his eyes wide open, holding a bit of an apple in one hand and a fruit knife in the other. Zhou Jin was so angry that his face turned red and white. He turned his head away with difficulty and didn't look at the bald man. He said weakly, go to apply for the card, go to Director He, don't hang around in front of me, wait, call Call the nurse in. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 102. The Wolf King does not have the ability to express his thoughts accurately like a human, but he has the intelligence of a child of several years old and can do some simple thinking. He has been in contact with Su Ming for a period of time. With the help of animal friends, his intelligence has improved. During this period, he has been howling to convey a simple message to Su Ming: freedom. Freedom is something that is imprinted in the bones of all wild animals. They would rather endure hunger and cold, fight against the sky and people, and fight against other ferocious beasts, than be kept in a cell like a pet for people's entertainment. The Wolf King and his wife are old and have lived in the zoo for many years. Even if they go to the wild, they will probably not be able to adapt and survive. But the wolf cub is different. It is still young and has the ability to adapt to life in the wild and return to the vast nature, instead of living in this iron cage all its life and being watched by people. No parents in the world would want their children to lose their freedom and live in a cage from birth. The Wolf King looked at Su Ming coldly. "Brother, when you ask me to do something, can you look a little friendlier? Don't pretend to be cool and pretend to be Ximen Chugzio all day long." Su Ming and the Wolf King squatted side by side on the steps of the wolf house. Su Ming turned his head and looked at the Wolf King, saying unhappily, "Wolves are born with that kind of cold eyes and are not good at expressing emotions. Even when looking at wolf cubs, they still have this look." The Wolf King can condescend to squat side by side with Su Ming like a big dog, which is quite respectful. Occasionally, tourists who pass by the front of the wolf house are all shocked when they see the scene and take out their mobile phones to take pictures. The wolf is in a bad mood today, so I won't take pictures. Those who have nothing to do, go boating and fishing. Su Ming waved his hand to drive away the tourists like flies, and communicated with the Wolf King with his mental power, trying to calm his emotions first. The old Wolf King is already in his twilight years, and his health is not very good. Don't worry about it. In theory, training animals so that they can return to nature is one of the zoo's own responsibilities. As long as there is a suitable way to allow the wolf cub to return to nature, Director Song will not object. One of the most important responsibilities of the Provincial Animal Protection Center is to release them into the wild, cultivate the wildness of animals, and release them back to nature. Release them into the wild is easy to say, but it is difficult to do. It requires a lot of human and material resources, and there is a lot of follow-up work to be done. The country has limited resources in this regard, so for the time being, it can only be used on endangered animals such as giant pandas and finless porpoises. The level of prairie wolves is not high enough, and it is impossible to spend energy and money specifically. Moreover, the act of releasing them into the wild itself also has major risks. Wild animals are naturally adapted to the wild environment, and can learn survival skills from their parents and tribes. The wolf cub was born in a zoo, and the relatives and friends around him were all captive animals. The skills of hunting and surviving in the wild have long been forgotten, and the little wolf cub has nowhere to learn. Releasing the little wolf cub back to nature rashly will only backfire. But compared with the Wolf King, the wolf cub also has natural advantages. It is still young and has not been assimilated by humans. It is like a blank sheet of paper. If it is properly trained from a young age, it will be able to return to nature when it grows up. After Su Ming left the wolf house, he went directly to find Director Song and told him his thoughts. As expected, Director Song's thoughts were similar to Su Ming's. Although prairie wolves are protected animals, they are not particularly rare. A few more or a few less will not have a big impact on the zoo. On the contrary, if the wolf cubs can be trained to return to nature, it will not only be good for animals, but also for the zoo. With a little publicity, it will be a very good political achievement project. Since you have this idea, I don't object. But there are 2 points. First, you can't hurt people or wolves. Second, The zoo can't afford to do this for the time being, Director Song said directly. No problem, as long as you nod, I will have a bottom line in my heart, Su Ming said. How are you going to start? Releasing the wolf into the wild is a major problem all over the world. The province has been experimenting with releasing the Beiji dolphins for many years, but they have not been successfully released into the wild, Director Song asked curiously. Su Ming thought for a while and said, I don't have any good ideas for the time being, but I think that the wolf cubs have just been born and cannot live in the wolf house all the time. Otherwise, over time, they will get used to being raised by people and lose their wildness. It will be even more difficult to release them into the wild in the future. Director Song was a little surprised and asked tentatively, you mean, let the wolf cubs out? Yes, Su Ming nodded as a matter of course. That's a wolf. Don't look at it as a little bit now, it won't take long for it to hurt people, Dean Song said. Director, I'll take them with me, you should be relieved, Su Ming said as he picked up a water bottle and filled the cup in front of Director Song with water with a smile. Director Song hesitated for a long time, and finally agreed reluctantly, Xiao Su, don't make any trouble. If there is anything wrong, lock up the wolf cub immediately. Don't worry, it's just a little wolf. With you in charge of the zoo, it would lie down obediently even if it was a dragon, let alone jackals, tigers, and leopards. Stop smiling. You are restless. The Navy Lake has just prospered, and now the wolf cub incident has popped up, making me and the people behind me nervous. Hee, with you on top, our zoo's boat can't capsize. After getting the approval of Director Song, Su Ming had the imperial sword in hand and returned to the wolf house to pick up the little wolf. The wolf house was Master Peng's territory. He greeted Master Peng first and then took the little wolf out directly. The Wolf King and the mother wolf did not send the little wolf off for 18 miles like most parents who had their sons going on a long journey. The old couple looked at the little wolf with cold eyes across the cage, then turned around at the same time and returned to the den, as if they were taking away someone else's child. Ah! The little wolf lay on the cement steps outside the wolf house and made a pitiful cry to his parents in the darkness in the distance. Seeing that his parents were unmoved, the little wolf tilted his head and looked at Su Ming. His little head could not understand why his parents didn't want him anymore. Growth is bound to be accompanied by pain. Su Ming snapped his fingers at the little guy, turned around and walked slowly out, saying casually, let's go, wolves must learn to grow up on their own. Su Ming left, and the Wolf King and his wife ignored it again. The little wolf stood on the steps alone, looking around blankly. A gust of wind blew, and the little wolf couldn't help shrinking his neck. His two little ears stood up all of a sudden. He looked at the wolf house with some nostalgia, as if he had made up his mind. He turned around and ran towards Su Ming on his four legs, running faster and faster. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 103. The arrival of Little Wolf caused quite a commotion in Ting Feng Shui Pavilion. Just in terms of combat effectiveness, cats and dogs are stronger than Little Wolf. Needless to say, the wolf and dog brothers can send the little wolf flying with just one slap. Even the cats, after being nourished by Su Ming's mental power for a long time, have become quite fierce and can fight against the little wolf in a duel. Luo Lifeng, if Dehe takes action himself, he can even stabilize Xiaolang. As for the alligator gar, snapping turtle, finless porpoise, and the like, they are marines and are two different things. But it was this fluffy little wolf that aroused great vigilance in cats and dogs as soon as it appeared. The wolf-dog brothers and the cats, who had always been at odds, actually put aside their past grievances and formed the same front, leaning against the wall and rushing towards each other. The little wolf growled. Not to be outdone, The little wolf cub glanced at the row of big guys in front of him with cold eyes, his fangs sticking out from the corners of his mouth, ready to pounce. The wolf cub is a natural wild animal, fundamentally different from cats and dogs. The wild aura in it makes cats and dogs instinctively afraid. If they were in the wild, they would be creatures from two camps. Predators and prey are not originally divided based on body size. When hunting, small hounds dare to attack big black bears and wild boars crazily. In fact, it is not that hounds are brave, it is precisely because hounds are extremely scared, so they behave almost crazy. This is often the reason why animals attack people. The same is true for people. When a person practices boxing to a deep level, the pores on his body will suddenly open when he exerts force. The feeling is the same as being frightened by a ghost when walking at night. The spinal creatures are violently frightened and the nerves are stimulated. System to stimulate potential. It's just that people are rational. After being frightened, they will not dare to attack because of fear. Animals are different. The more frightened they are, the more ferocious their attacks will be. Be honest with me. Su Ming roared, and used his mental power to clasp the heads of the two groups at the same time. Using himself as an intermediary, he used his mental power to connect the cat, dog, and wolf. Mental connection is the most basic communication at the lowest level. With Su Ming, the co-owner of the world, acting as the peacemaker in the middle, the tense atmosphere between the two sides suddenly eased a lot. You guys are staying at home these days, and I'll take Huiya to the back mountain. Grey Fang is the name Su Ming gave to the little wolf cub. He hopes that one day, it will turn into a wild big bad wolf with sharp claws. Since it is preparing for release into the wild, you cannot keep the wolf cub in a waterside pavilion like cats and dogs. Instead, you need to take it to the wild and get in touch with nature as much as possible. Last time the wasps and bees found a new home, the queen wanted to see Su Ming more than once, but Su Ming was too busy and never had the chance to go and see it. Now it was just in time to do both things together and take little wolf with him. Monkey Mountain stopped by to visit the queen bee. The bee's new home was relatively far away. Su Ming estimated that it would take 2 or 3 days to walk back and forth in the mountains. He would have to live in the mountains at night, so he had to make advance preparations, so he drove to the outdoor supplies store in the city and bought some outdoor equipment. Tent, Swiss Army knife, windproof lighter, compressed biscuits. You can't bring too many things, it is full of a hiking bag. It stands to reason that Su Ming, who has animal friends, is synonymous with invincibility in the mountains, and there is no safety problem. However, probably because he grew up watching various ghost and monster movies, when he first went into the mountains alone, there was a very exciting feeling. After leaving the outdoor supplies store, I went to a fake military supplies store and bought a dagger and an imitation AK military spur. Only then did I feel safe. After finishing all this, he returned to the zoo and picked up Grey Fang. In addition to Grey Fang, there is also an old friend to take with him. Hai Dongqing had long promised to take him out for a few days, but he never had the chance to fulfill his promise. This time, he had the opportunity to use it for personal gain. As soon as they entered the bird garden, the Hai Dongqing with claws as white as jade seemed to be aware of something very keenly. Its wings fluttered and flew up, landing steadily on Su Ming's arm. "How many times have I told you not to grab my arm? It hurts." Su Ming rolled his eyes, and as soon as his hand shook, Hai Dongqing jumped on his shoulder. The scientific name of Hai Dongqing is partridge. It is known as the highest and fastest flying bird in the world. It has the meaning of God of 10,000 eagles. Legend has it that only one Hai Dongqing is born out of 100,000 condors. Just like all myths and legends, it is basically nonsense that only one triton is born out of 100,000 condors. However, the ferocity and preciousness of triton are indeed true. Among falcons, triton has almost no rivals. In fact, because it can fly, Haidonking has no natural enemies in the biological world except humans. During the Manchu Qing dynasty, anyone who captured the white-clawed seaweed must be handed over to the Ministry of Internal Affairs for the emperor to play with. One seaweed was worth dozens of taels of silver, enough to feed an average person for several years. If a criminal offering Shanghai Dongqing can even absolve you from sin. Several emperors of the Manchu and Qing dynasties were poor poets, but they all loved to compose poems. Kangxi had poems, Yuchong was 360, and the most handsome man was Hai Dongqing. In modern times, due to indiscriminate hunting and killing by humans, seaweeds have almost become unique, especially white-clawed seaweeds are even rarer. Therefore, before the finless porpoise appeared, this white jade sea turtle was almost one of the most precious animals in the zoo. Su Ming was going to take Hai Dongqing away. Master Peng was a little worried at first, but when he saw Hai Dongqing standing on Su Ming's shoulders very obediently, he shook his head and smiled, without saying anything else, turned around and returned to Shuahun Lake. Management crews went. As the old saying goes, it is hard to catch a falcon even if you have to fight to the death. It is very difficult to tame a wild falcon. After catching it, you must first tie a foot tangle to the falcon and keep it awake for days and nights to wear down its wildness. This is called teasing the falcon. Then, you must run through several steps such as running ropes, and finally fatten it to scrape out the intestinal fat and starve it. Only then can you tame the falcon and then release it outside. Once tamed, the falcon's loyalty is also quite high. When Master Peng saw that the Saker falcon jumped onto Su Ming's shoulder obediently, he knew that the Saker falcon had been completely tamed by Su Ming and there was no problem taking it out. As for how to tame it, Master Peng did not ask much. It is no secret that Su Ming has a way with animals. People cannot be compared with each other. If you always want to compare with Su Ming in training animals, or always wonder how Su Ming did it, it is tantamount to asking for trouble. Su Ming was just about to leave with the Saker falcon when a shrill voice suddenly came from the next room, cursing, "Stealing the bird! Stealing the bird!" Su Ming was stunned and looked around. The cage was empty, not a single ghost was in sight. "Idiot, idiot," a voice rang out, less than 4 or 5 meters away from Su Ming. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 104. Two voices sounded in succession. Su Ming looked around but didn't find the person who was talking. But he suddenly remembered something and turned his head to look at the birdcage next door with a smile. The birdcage next door houses a pair of sisters. Two red and blue macaws, about half a meter tall, were standing on the treetops, combing their feathers with their curved beaks as if nothing had happened. The red and blue macaw is a kind of macaw, native to Mexico and Brazil. It can be nearly 1 meter long and is the most gorgeous of the large parrots. The feathers on its body are bright red, with blue and red tails and wings, so it is called the red and blue macaw. Like all macaws, the red and blue macaw is also called the Hercules. There are many hard fruits in the American rainforest that are difficult to crack with a hammer, but the macaw can easily peck the outer skin of the fruit and eat the seeds inside. In addition to its beautiful, huge appearance and great strength, the macaw has a very powerful ability. Many fruits and flowers in its diet are poisonous. Macaws eat these things for a long time and develop an indestructible body that is immune to all poisons. People who like to nag tend to live longer, and so do parrots. Macaws can even live to 80 years old. The two sisters are only in their early 20s and are in adolescence. Needless to say, the words just now came from the mouths of the two macaws. Pretend, pretend again. Su Ming was amused to see them acting as if it had nothing to do with him. He threw a nut across the cage and hit a macaw on the forehead. The parrot tilted its head, bit the nut in one bite, and then broke it into pieces with a snap. The other parrot probably learned swear words from tourists, tilted its head and said to Su Ming, "Idiot! Idiot! Don't curse!" Su Ming glared at the two guys, then prepared to leave with the Saker falcon. Not long after he walked out of the cage, he heard the macaw flapping its wings behind him, saying in a strange tone, take me, and me, and me. Su Ming looked back and saw two big parrots sticking to the cage, calling him through the gap in the wire, flapping their wings to catch up, but unfortunately they were blocked by the cage. Parrots are relatively smart and can learn to speak like humans. Every time Su Ming comes to the aviary, he will communicate with them with his mental power, talk to them and tease them. After a long time, these two guys can actually use human language to communicate very simply. You guys are so smart. Stay in the cage honestly. Su Ming doesn't want to take these two guys with him. If he takes too many animals at once, it will be difficult to explain to Director Song if something unexpected happens. In fact, if it is another animal, even a fierce beast like a tiger or a lion, Su Ming is willing to take it with him, but not this pair of parrot sisters. The animals in the zoo all have their own personalities, such as the wolf is indifferent, the fox is suspicious, and the bear is silly. This pair of parrot sisters are particularly long-winded and talkative. They talk non-stop and are extremely noisy. It's okay to chat with them occasionally, but once they get along for more than 10 minutes, Su Ming feels a fly buzzing around his ears, and he unconsciously has the urge to strangle these two guys. Seeing that Su Ming ignored them, the parrot sisters were not happy and shouted at the top of their voices. Idiot! Idiot! Come back! Come back! Someone! Someone! There's a thief! There's a thief! The parrot's voice was sharp and crisp, and it could be heard far away. As a result, nearby tourists were alarmed, and many people came over here. When they saw a Saker falcon standing on Su Ming's shoulder, the tourists looked at them strangely, as if they were looking at a thief. I'm a keeper, Su Ming explained quickly. The macaw kept yelling behind him, there's a thief! There's a thief! The other one echoed and shouted, catch the thief! Catch the thief! Su Ming was not afraid of being mistaken for a thief, because he had the zoo ID on him. But who knows what these two troublemakers will say next? It's not uncommon for parrots to talk, but if the IQ of the macaw is far beyond the level of parrot's imitation, it would be too shocking and inevitably arouse suspicion. What a bad beast, you even learned to threaten. Before the macaw got into trouble, Su Ming quickly sent two mental powers to it, I'll take you there, shut up now. The macaw really stopped talking immediately, flew back to the bird stand, lowered its head to peck at fruits and vegetables, but looked up from time to glance at Su Ming, fearing that he would break his promise and sneak away. Am I such a person? Su Ming rolled his eyes. So, two more parrots as tall as children were added to the departure team that day. There is no road in the mountains, even the wranglers can't drive in. Su Ming entered the mountain from a small path. At first, he could meet a few climbers sporadically. After walking for 3 or 4 hours, there were already barren mountains and wild ridges ahead, and there was no ghost to be seen. Goza was buzzing in front and leading the way. Above his head, the Saker falcon was soaring in the air, patrolling privately with a pair of sharp eagle eyes, and occasionally swooping down and falling into the forest, grabbing a small snake like lightning. The two parrots were too big, and Su Ming couldn't carry them. They flew low to the left and right of Su Ming, flying from one tree to another, just jumping forward. Hurry up, idiot! Idiot, hurry up! The voice of the parrot urging kept ringing. Grey Fang followed Su Ming closely. Grey Fang was about the same size as a puppy and had no ability to protect himself, but he showed no fear at all. Instead, he was full of curiosity about everything around him. When he saw a dead tree or a pile of fallen leaves, he would go up and dig a few leaves. Occasionally, he would stop and bar his teeth and growl at the dense forest in the distance. Su Ming walked in the middle, carrying a large mountaineering bag, a replica bayonet hanging on his waist, a dagger tied to his calf, and a Swiss Army knife and compass in his jeans pocket. The equipment weighed more than 20 kilograms. Fortunately, animal friends also greatly increased his physical strength, otherwise he would not have been able to walk so far. The deeper you go into the mountains, the more difficult it is to walk. There is no sign of any human activity in the mountains, and various birds fly out of the forest from time to time. Before 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the dense woods blocked all the sunlight, and the forest gradually darkened. It was about 6 o'clock, and the forest was completely dark. There were heavy shadows of trees in front of us, and the forest in the distance was quiet. Occasionally, a few calls of unknown animals could be heard. There were thick dead leaves everywhere under our feet, and every step made a squeaking sound. In the darkness, Grey Fang's two eyes were particularly bright, emitting a faint blue light. The two parrots had been calling all the way, and now they were calling again. "I'm tired. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I'm hungry." The two guys were singing a double act, standing on the treetops and calling. "Set up camp on the spot." Su Ming simply stopped the team, pulled out his bayonet, and cleared a small piece of dead leaves. The macaws flew over and landed in front of Su Ming, waiting for Su Ming to feed them. Su Ming waved his bayonet at the macaws, grinning, and asked, "How about roasting you two for dinner?" Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 105. The two macaws were frightened by Su Ming. They flapped their wings and jumped up. They huddled head to head and shook their heads and screamed at Su Ming. "No. No. Elegant butterfly. Elegant butterfly. I'm just trying to scare you." Su Ming chuckled, "Since you don't want to be eaten, go find some dead branches and dry firewood. I want to make a fire." The two parrots were tall and powerful. After a while, they took out a lot of dry firewood from the forest and piled it into a pile. Su Ming also cleared a clearing and took out a lighter to light a bonfire. Huiya was born with a fear of flames. His small body huddled behind Su Ming, not daring to get close to the fire. When the two parrots were looking for firewood, they even took out a lot of pine cones from the forest as a self-interest. They had lived in the zoo for a long time and were not very afraid of fire. They piled the nuts by the campfire and picked up the pine cones one by one. He took it out and bit it hard in his mouth, crushing the pine cone and picking out the nuts inside to eat. Su Ming set up a small marching pot on the fire and cooked some compressed biscuits and canned meat. Soon, the small pot began to roll. Su Ming stirred it with a spoon a few times, and a fragrance wafted out. Smelling the fragrance, the little wolf Huiya boldly approached the campfire, circling back and forth around the small pot on the campfire, his tail swaying, looking greedy. "This is not for you to eat," Su Ming gently hit the little wolf on the head with a spoon. Huiya screamed, with a confused look on his face. Bringing Grey Tooth out is to cultivate its wildness and prepare for its future release into the wild. If it is still like in the zoo, where the keepers take care of everything, and Grey Tooth can reach out for food and open its mouth, how can it be cultivated? Huiya is still too young now, so it is unrealistic for him to hunt for food on his own, but Su Ming can only make arrangements. Not long after, a black shadow fell from the sky with strong wind. Hai Dongqing, who was sent to hunt by Su Ming, came back. Under his feet, he was holding a 1-meter-long flower snake. The flower snake had probably been killed by Hai Dongqing. It was limp and motionless. Both ends hang down. Under the other paw, there is a big mountain rat that keeps twisting its body. Mountain mice are a specialty of the mountains. They are much larger and more ferocious than ordinary house mice. They are as plump as a kitten. They eat bamboo shoots, tree roots, and drink mountain spring water in the mountains. Their meat is juicy and delicious. They are a good species of mountain delicacies. In Yangchuan City, mountain rats are occasionally sold in the vegetable market, and each one costs hundreds of yuan. Hai Dongqing carelessly threw the still-living mountain mouse in front of Huiya, then landed on the ground, stepped on the flower snake with both feet, lowered his head, and pecked a big hole in the belly of the flower snake with his hard eagle beak, enjoying it with relish. Start eating. This is your food, get rid of it, Su Ming pointed at the fat mountain rat and said to Hui Ya. The fat mountain rat was caught by Hai Dongqing. He was so frightened that he was thrown down from the air again. He was knocked unconscious. After landing, he shook his body and looked around with a pair of small eyes. Gray Fang walked slowly, circling the mountain rat, observing the mountain rat curiously. It was the first time it saw this strange creature. The wolf's instinct told it that this creature was delicious and could be eaten. However, it used to drink milk and occasionally eat some meat, but no one had ever taught it how to eat a living creature. Hai Dongqing was on the snake and didn't even look at the mountain rat. The mountain rat probably thought that the opportunity had come, his little eyes lit up, and he swooped out from in front of Hui Ya. Hui Ya felt his eyes blurred, and subconsciously smacked it with his little paw, but it came up empty. In such an instant, the mountain rat had already fled far away and was about to escape. Stop! Stop! A strange voice sounded, and the macaw, who was not sure whether it was an older sister or a younger sister, fell from the sky and stepped on the mountain rat's back. With its body like a mountain, it pushed the mountain rat to the ground without any suspense. The mountain rat's four legs were fighting with all its strength. He scratched the ground trying to escape, but couldn't move even half a step. Can you eat it? Can you eat it? Parrots generally don't eat meat, so the fat mountain rat probably aroused their appetite. Another macaw also came up, lowering its head to bite the mountain rat. Don't eat it, Su Ming brushed over with his mental power. The macaw reluctantly caught the mountain rat and threw it in front of Gray Fang again. Rookie! Rookie! Weak chicken! Weak chicken! The meat of the two parrots ran away from their mouths, and they looked very unconvinced. They did not dare to get angry with Su Ming, so they could only laugh at Hui Ya from the side. Ah, ah! Gray Fang became angry, and not to be outdone, he growled lowly at the macaw sisters, waving his little paws in protest. In terms of fighting, the current little wolf is not much stronger than a cat, and is no match for the giant macaw. But if Gray Fang dares to demonstrate to the macaw, it can be seen that it is still full of wildness in its heart, but its skills are still a bit lacking, which makes the mountain rat escape. The parrot sisters are naturally mean-mouthed, but they are not very aggressive. When Gray Fang provokes them, they follow the principle of safety first, flutter their wings and fly up, landing on a high branch. Waiting to ensure 100% safety, the little wolf cannot. After posing any threat to them, he stood on the tree and cursed at the little wolf. Sha-cha! Dasha! Idiot! Big idiot! In the quiet forest, he heard the noisy calls of these two beasts. Su Ming was too lazy to use his mental energy to care about them. Instead, he snapped his fingers at Hai Dongqing, whose mouth was full of blood, and said, "Let it go, shut up." Hai Dongqing was eating full of energy when he was interrupted from eating. He raised his head extremely unhappy and stared at the parrot sisters on the treetop with a cold expression. One thing brings another down. As a bird, Hai Dongqing is the overlord of the sky. After Hai Dongqing glared at him, the two slutty bitches actually shut up at the same time and did not dare to speak anymore. They lowered their heads and combed their feathers in boredom. Come! Beside the campfire, the wolf cub also launched an attack, lying on the ground and growling at the mountain rat, ready to pounce. Seeing that there was no way to escape, the mountain rat was at the critical moment of life and death. The ferocious nature of the wild animal was also aroused. He grinned, revealing two large fangs that could easily bite the roots of trees, and screamed at Gray Fang. As soon as Hui Ya's body ran away, he put his two front paws on the mountain rat's shoulders and bit down on the mountain rat's neck. The fleshy mountain rat was not much smaller than Hui Ya. It turned somersaults, but its shoulder was also scratched with several bloody marks by Grey Fang's claws, which made it squeak in pain. Grey Fang quickly turned over and climbed up. Without hesitation, he grabbed the mountain rat's fat butt with his paw and bit down on the mountain rat's thigh. Grey Fang and mountain rat come and go. At first, the mountain rat could resist for a few times, and even relied on its strong body to gain the upper hand for a short time. But after a few rounds, Grey Fang seemed to have found the rhythm of hunting, and began to adapt to this kind of life and death struggle, and the wild nature of the wolf also began. Exposed, the mountain rat quickly became nothing more than a beating, with new scars constantly appearing all over his body. Finally, Grey Fang found an opportunity and bit the mountain rat's neck in one bite. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 106. Wolves are natural hunters, and mountain rats are at best stronger small animals. Once Grey Fang finds the rhythm, the mountain rat is no match for it. It was bitten off the neck in a few bites and died. This time, Grey Fang didn't need anyone to teach him. He instinctively lay on the mountain rat and bit it. Before Su Ming finished his meal, half of the mountain rat went into Grey Fang's stomach. Grey Fang's mouth was full of blood. He stretched out his tongue full of barbs, licked the fur on the edge of his mouth that was still stained with blood, and then raised his head towards the sky and let out a few long ah-ah-ah. Compared with adult wolves like the Wolf King, Grey Fang's long howl seemed short and immature, but more wild. Survival of the fittest, Su Ming has friends of animals, but he is not the mother of animals. There is no need to care about the life and death of every animal, nor is he prepared to rely on his own abilities to break the balance of the food chain. He just watched Grey Fang preying on mountain rats silently on the side, without any intervention. It was not until Grey Fang started barking that Su Ming covered the guy's mouth. What's the point of barking? What if we attract a large number of wild wolves? Su Ming glared at Grey Fang. Grey Fang twisted a few times in Su Ming's arms. Probably not satisfied with barking, he squeezed his head out of Su Ming's hands and opened his mouth to continue barking. Su Ming pinched its upper and lower mouths and slapped it on the butt. You've only eaten meat for a few days, and your wings are not hard yet, and you dare to disobey. Grey Fang was beaten, so he didn't dare to bark. His two pointed ears drooped back and looked at Su Ming pitifully. No one talked all night. With Grey Fang, Saker Falcon, and Macaw on guard, Su Ming simply extinguished the campfire and got into his sleeping bag and slept until dawn. Opening his eyes, the faint sunlight sprinkled from the shade of the trees, falling on the woods covered with dead leaves, reflecting large and small spots of light. The sound of birds flying in the forest in the morning came to his ears, and the faint fragrance of dew floated in the air. A furry head lay on his chest. Grey Fang got into the sleeping bag at some point and lay on Su Ming's chest. Su Ming moved slightly, and Grey Fang woke up immediately, got out of the sleeping bag, and stretched a long lazy waist on the ground. Su Ming also climbed out of the sleeping bag, went to the mountain spring not far away, scooped up a handful of water and washed his face. He originally thought that he could encounter some large animals in the middle of the night, such as wild boars, but he didn't expect that although this place was deep in the mountains, there were very few animals. There were many small guys like birds and mice, but slightly larger ones were very rare. It seems that the animals were scared by people, and they all moved to the deep mountains and didn't show up until they had no choice. There were no animals, but traces of people were found. After walking along the mountain stream for more than 2 hours, Su Ming actually found a small camp by the stream. It seemed that someone had camped here last night. Judging from the size of the camp, there were about 5 or 6 people, perhaps hikers who went into the mountains to explore, or nearby mountain hunters. Huiya sniffed around the camp for a while and found that the direction these people left was not towards the bee colony, but on the contrary, Su Ming did not bother and continued on his way. Along the way, it was almost over mountains and ridges. Some places were simply impossible to set foot on. There was simply an 80-90 degree slope blocking the road, or a large area of swamp-like mud, even Su Ming's current skills could not pass through. Fortunately, there were 3 big birds. Although they could not fly over with Su Ming, who weighed more than 100 kilograms, the 3 big birds came out together to grab Su Ming, which could greatly reduce the weight, and finally barely passed. Until the afternoon, bypassing a small ridge, and walking for a long time in the maze-like woods, came to a small canyon. The small canyon was 2 or 3 meters wide, with cliffs on both sides and pebbles at the foot. It looked like a dry mountain stream. A few bees got the news and buzzed to the valley entrance to greet Su Ming. Fortunately, Su Ming reacted quickly and hugged the parrot sisters' necks, otherwise the silly birds would have almost bitten the bees to death. Woo, woo. Chee-me, chee-me. The parrot sisters, whose necks were pinched, made strange noises. Under the guidance of the bees, Su Ming entered the canyon. After walking around for more than 10 minutes, Su Ming's eyes lit up. In front of him was a valley surrounded by mountains. In the farthest distance, a small waterfall flowed down from the cliff far away and fell into the valley, nourishing the plants in the valley. Standing at the valley entrance, you can see the entire valley at a glance. The valley is simply a sea of flowers, with all kinds of wild flowers that cannot be named, blooming everywhere. Great place, Su Ming nodded with satisfaction. Standing on the hillside, the valley seemed small, because it was high above. In fact, the real area of the valley was probably amazing, much larger than the entire zoo. It was not only hidden, but also full of wild flowers, which could provide sufficient raw materials for bees to make honey. Walking along the hillside grassland into the valley, Su Ming seemed to be in the legendary 100 Flowers Valley, with flowers blooming everywhere, butterflies flying, and some bees happily working in it. There seemed to be a faint sweet fragrance in the air. The more types of flowers, the better the honey brewed. In just a short distance, Su Ming saw at least dozens of different types of wild flowers. Gray Fang followed Su Ming not far behind, fluttering in the grass that was taller than it, chasing butterflies and dragonflies and playing, crushing a large area of the grass, having a lot of fun. There are generally no large predators in such places, not to mention that there is a Saker falcon watching over them in the sky, so Su Ming just let Gray Fang do whatever he wants. He followed honey into the valley, stopping and starting. After walking more than a mile, he finally saw the long-lost bee colony. The branches of more than a dozen large poplar trees were full of heavy honeycombs, and a large honeycomb that was more than half a person tall was very eye-catching among them. In the woods, there were flying bees everywhere, and the number was far beyond Su Ming's expectations. From a distance, it was just a large black patch. Huh? Why are there so many bees? Su Ming was slightly surprised. The number of bees he saw in front of him was more than 5 or 6 times that of the last bee colony. It was overwhelming. Even if the queen bee was fertile, the bee colony would not grow so large in a short time, right? After a closer look, Su Ming realized that something was wrong. These bees, divided into groups, constantly collided violently with each other, and groups of bees attacked each other, and injured bees kept falling on the grass like raindrops. The bee swarms were not making honey at all, but waging a war. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 107. What's going on? Is there a civil strife? Su Ming was shocked to see the chaos among the bee colonies. After not seeing each other for a month, could it be that there was a conflict between the bees and the wasps, or that something happened to the bees themselves and they started fighting among themselves? After a closer look, most of the wasps did not participate in the battle. They guarded the largest hive in groups. They did not seem to be rebelling. They should be protecting the safety of the queen bee. In addition, bees are peaceful by nature. The stinger of a bee can only be used once, and it will die after it is used up. Therefore, bees generally do not fight easily, let alone fight the wasps in the same trench. Besides, the queen bee, whose intelligence is far superior to that of ordinary bees, should not allow this to happen. In any case, the bee colony will only develop healthily. Thinking of this, Su Ming, with doubts, invested his mental power into the two bee colonies that were fighting. As soon as the mental power entered the bee colony, the bees that came into contact with it were immediately distinguished and divided into two distinct camps. A small number of bees felt familiar, like poor peasants meeting their Red Army relatives, while the vast majority of bees were confused about the spiritual power and had no feedback at all. It seemed that this was their first time to come into contact with spiritual power. Su Ming then realized that it was not the bee colony that was in strife, but his own bee colony was fighting with other unfamiliar bee colonies in the mountains. In this case, of course, he had to help his own people. Without asking any more questions, Su Ming did not hesitate to divide half of his spiritual power and poured it into the bees on his side. Like last time, he organized the bee colonies that were fighting each other into an orderly battle team, led by the larger and stronger bees. Su Ming was in overall command and fought strategically and tactically. At the same time, he used the old method again. He used the remaining spiritual power to cover the enemy's bee colony. The bee colonies in the forest were too dense. With a pounce of spiritual power, it was like a big net that controlled a large number of enemy bees at once. Su Ming's mental power now far exceeds the level of the first time he controlled bees. He directly forced hundreds of enemy bees to rebel at the same time. If there are those who refuse to obey, Su Ming will not say much. He will use his mental power to shock them. If they cannot be killed, they will be dizzy and lose their combat effectiveness. In this way, the Soviet army, which was originally at a disadvantage, suddenly felt like a shot of cardiotonic. With the help of a large number of controlled puppet troops, they launched an effective counterattack against the enemy bee colony, and the situation changed. But the number of enemies was too large. Although there were hundreds of honeys controlled by Su Ming, in terms of the total number, it was only a small and insignificant force of the enemy. The remaining enemy bee colonies still had an absolute advantage in number. After a little confusion in the early stage, the enemy bees that came from nowhere quickly turned the situation around, suppressed the Soviet bees with their numerical advantage, and regained the upper hand. Even with Su Ming's command, the enemy often had to sacrifice 3 or 4 lives to exchange for 1 life of the Su army, but the enemy bee swarms were almost overwhelming and difficult to count. Not to mention 3 or 4 lives for 1 life of the Su army, even 30 or 40 lives for 1 life of the Su army would be more than enough. If the killing continued at this rate, before all the enemies were killed, the bees under Su Ming's command would be killed first. Moreover, some enemy troops had obviously discovered Su Ming and flew towards him in large numbers. Oh my God! Su Ming looked at the dense bees that were getting closer and closer, and his scalp was numb. There were probably tens of thousands of bees just rushing towards him. No matter how strong his mental strength was, he couldn't control so many at the same time. Help! Oh my God! Come and help me! Su Ming was almost scared to pee, and he shouted at the top of his voice. The sky above his head darkened slightly, and 3 huge birds fell from the sky and rushed towards the bee swarm. The Saker falcon let out a long whistle, dived, and spread its wings like knives on both sides of its body, crashing fiercely into the swarm of bees. The Saker falcon, charging at high speed, was like a sharp sword, easily cutting a blank passage in the dark swarm of bees, passing through the swarm of bees, and splitting the swarm of bees in two. The Saker falcon flew back into the sky, and then once again took a diving posture, launched a charge, and continued to intersperse in the swarm of bees at high speed. Every time, it could easily break the defense of the swarm of bees, cutting the dense swarm of bees into pieces, and defeating them. If the Saker falcon is an indestructible blade, then the two macaws are two giant hammers. The macaw's flying ability is not good, far inferior to the Saker falcon. If they learn to dive at high speed like the Saker falcon, the only result is to dive into the ground and knock themselves dizzy. But they have their own way. The parrot sisters, one on the left and one on the right, like two fat penguins, twisted their legs and staggered into the two flanks of the bee colony. With a strong flap of their big wings, they could create an airflow and blow away a large number of bees. Although they have poor flying ability, they are not incapable of flying. In the bee colony, the two parrots are more like gliding, jumping, and hopping, like two large tanks rushing through a group of infantry. Wherever they pass, the surrounding bees are knocked down and repelled. "Shoot you to death, shoot you to death," they shouted while rushing. Birds are the natural enemies of honey. They have dense and thick feathers. The stings of bees and even wasps cannot penetrate their feathers. Saker falcons and macaws are the best among them. In front of them, no matter how many enemy bees there are, it is useless. They can only be beaten passively. What's more, there is Su Ming behind to make trouble with his mental power. He also learned smartly this time. He did not use mental power to directly participate in controlling the rebellion of honey. Instead, he divided his mental power into several strands and put it into the bee colony to make trouble. He harassed the east and the west. Sometimes he deliberately let the bees gather on the root of the three birds' attack, and rushed away a large nest. After the three birds scattered the bees, before the other party gathered again, there would be a sudden mental force, which would shake the bees that had just recovered. In a few seconds, the bees with little IQ could no longer organize an effective attack and were scattered like sand. The terrifying thing about a bee swarm is its number. If tens of thousands of bees pounce on them at the same time, even a pack of wolves, tigers, and leopards will have to flee. But with the three giant birds fighting desperately and Su Ming's torment, the bee fighting army that pounced on Su Ming was completely defeated. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 108. The enemy bee assault army wanted to decapitate Su Ming, but they failed to do so. Su Ming's head was not cut off, but was defeated by the three big birds and Su Ming's mental harassment. There were not many bees killed or injured, but their morale was completely broken. The remaining bees were like headless flies, flying aimlessly. It is better to pursue the enemy with the remaining courage. The battle has only achieved a partial victory. The reactionaries are garbage. If you don't sweep them, they will not take the initiative to get into the trash can. The main battlefield in the forest, the Soviet bees are still suppressed. Su Ming immediately commanded the three big birds to rush into the woods to help the Soviet army deal with the remaining enemies and fight the second battle. With the previous experience, the battle went much more smoothly. Although the enemy bees were numerous, they were not like the Soviet bees after all. With Su Ming's command, they were more like a group of scattered soldiers. The Soviet army already had its own bridgehead. The Soviet bees trapped in the center were like a huge bait, attracting the enemy bees to surround and kill. Several big birds rushed together and cooperated with mental power to rescue around. The trick to besieging a point and attacking reinforcements is to have enough strength to knock out the reinforcements, but the enemy bees obviously do not have this strength. The reinforcements they attracted were by no means the weak chickens of Li Tianxia and Huang Baidao's troops in the Battle of Mengliangwu, but the heavenly soldiers and generals in the animal world. The besieged Soviet bees were no less than the American Ace Division. Although there was a huge gap in numbers between the two sides, their actual combat effectiveness was just the opposite. As time went on, the enemy bees had fewer and fewer living forces, and most of them had collapsed, and even in terms of numbers, they could not create an absolute advantage over the Soviet army. After fighting for more than an hour, Su Ming suddenly discovered that although the forest was large, it had no opponents, and the enemy bees had completely collapsed. "It's so lonely." Su Ming raised his neck to look at the sky, pretending to be a big goose, and even tears of loneliness in his eyes were oozing out of the coldness of being high up. Actually, it was because I was bitten on the back of my neck by accident, and it hurt. What a fool. The parrot sisters laughed weakly in the forest. After a big battle, although the three birds were not injured, they were exhausted. That's right, even if 100,000 pigs were tied up and not moved for people to kill, it would take a long time to chop them, and they would be exhausted, let alone fighting. Why didn't I kill you two bitches? Su Ming rolled his eyes, spit on the big bite on his neck, and shuddered again in pain, and then walked into the forest to observe the results of the battle. What a big battle! The forest was full of dead bees, including a small number of wasps. There was a thick layer of dead bees everywhere in the grass, and it squeaked when you stepped on it, and the intestinal fluid gurgled out, which was disgusting. I heard that roasted bees are delicious. I knew I would bring a barbecue grill to save waste, Su Ming thought unscrupulously. The enemy suffered too many casualties, and it was impossible to count them, nor was there any need to count them. However, judging from some previous situations, Su Ming's bees and wasps suffered 30% of the total casualties in this battle, and almost all the wounded soldiers died in the battle. Fortunately, Su Ming arrived in time, and the battle was finally won. If he had arrived half a day later, he would not have seen the group of bees under his command that had grown with great difficulty. What's going on? Damn it, what's going on? Although he won, Su Ming was still confused. Bees are peaceful animals, and even between different groups, there are rarely such large-scale battles. What's going on? It took a lot of effort to develop a large group of bees and wasps that can provide a stable supply of honey. This time, so many died at once, and Su Ming felt that his heart was aching. These are all my property. The bees in the swarm were talking at once to explain to Su Ming through their mental power, but these guys were so low in intelligence that it took them a long time to express a common word, not to mention explaining such a complicated matter. Su Ming asked for a long time, but not only did he not get any results, but he was also annoyed by the buzzing of these bees. Where is the leader, Queen Bee? Tell me. Su Ming directly contacted the Queen Bee with his mental power. When Su Ming was not around, the Queen Bee was the highest existence in the swarm, and most of the wasps protected the Queen Bee, so the Queen Bee was relatively safe. By the same token, when Su Ming was not around, the only one who could command all the bees and wasps was the Queen Bee. Little girl, if you don't tell me today, Su Ming threatened viciously, but he couldn't continue speaking halfway. Even if this little girl couldn't give a reasonable explanation, he couldn't rape it, first do that and then do that. Although he couldn't really take any harsh punishment measures against the Queen Bee, from her mental power, the Queen Bee still clearly felt that Su Ming was angry, and she was frightened and shrank back into the hive. The Queen Bee at this time was a circle bigger than the last time she saw it, and looked like a kitten. She huddled in the nest pitifully, not daring to answer Su Ming's words. Dear, it's useless to escape. Tell the truth, and I won't embarrass you for the sake of our past friendship. Su Ming changed his strategy, hooked his finger at the Queen Bee, and said with a very frivolous smile. The Queen Bee was not stupid either. The key was that the mental power connection was too direct, and the change of expression could not deceive people. The Queen Bee could still detect Su Ming's anger from his frivolous expression. After asking the Queen Bee several times, the Queen Bee finally sent out a few weak mental powers, like a child who had done something wrong, and hesitantly told Su Ming the cause, process, and ending of the incident. It is not appropriate to say tell, because the Queen Bee does not have such good language expression ability, but through direct communication with mental power, Su Ming finally figured out what happened. This valley is prosperous and lush. Before the Queen Bee brought the team here, there were more than a dozen groups of native bees in the valley, and the number of each group of bees far exceeded the Queen Bee team. As Su Ming knew, bees are not warlike, and the valley is large enough to accommodate even several times more bees. Therefore, after the queen bee team settled here, the local native bees did not show any hostility, and of course there was no communication. Both sides went their own way and lived their own lives. At the beginning, they got along normally. If you want to blame someone, blame the queen bee for causing trouble, which caused a big mess. Strictly speaking, it's not entirely the queen bee's fault. In the final analysis, it was Su Ming who caused the trouble. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Super Zoo. Author, Yin Seg Nian Bai. Chapter 109. Bees are not wary. In addition to nature and other reasons, there is another important reason: they have low intelligence. War, politics, or grabbing money, food, women, and territory mostly occur among advanced creatures. Almost brainless guys like bees, as long as other creatures don't affect their survival, it's impossible to take the initiative. Damn it, they don't have any thoughts of honor, conquest or development in their little heads. In fact, with the exception of humans, most animals will not actively attack other animals unless their lives are threatened or in order to survive. If the Soviet bees were still ordinary bees, then of course nothing would happen. What Su Ming saw today would be a wonderful situation where the colonists and the natives lived in harmony. However, this group of new bees had undergone mental training. The ability to baptize bees is greater than that of native bees, whether in intelligence or other abilities. The queen bee is the best among them, and has even developed the ability to think simply. In a sense, this queen bee is even one life level higher than other bees. The two are no longer the same creature. The gap may be even greater than that between apes and apes. When the civilization of the newcomers is far superior to that of the natives, but the natives occupy the most fertile land and countless resources, war is almost inevitable. It's just almost inevitable, not necessarily inevitable. Although the queen bee is large, she has little fighting power. She is the least belligerent among the bees. The existence of the indigenous bees does not threaten the survival of the Soviet bees. Under normal circumstances, they may not be able to fight. But the problem lies with the queen bee. Ever since she gained the ability to think simply, the queen bee and other bees, even those of the same group, are no longer on the same level. Although the bee colony is huge, no one can communicate with it. In the valley of Nyata, the larger the bee colony becomes, the more lonely the queen bee feels. People can't be idle. If they are too idle, they will cause trouble. This is especially true for women. If they are idle for a long time, they will have random thoughts. Giving women and men equal rights to go to work is definitely one of the most creative bills in mankind. From then on, women's redundancy will be eliminated. The energy is transferred to work, liberating the majority of male compatriots. That's too far off, Su Ming continued to think through his thoughts. The queen bee is really bored. What can a woman do if she is idle and bored? Shopping for clothes? Obviously the queen bee doesn't have this condition yet. She's looking for her best friend to gossip about, but please, there aren't any other bees here who are qualified to be her best friend. Then there is only one last option left: want a man. So in the deep boudoir, the queen bee, lonely, cold, empty and helpless, missed her spiritual and life mentor, comrade Su Ming, more and more. It sent messages through Urguza several times, wanting to see Su Ming, but Su Ming was so busy all day long that he couldn't spare any time, so his plan to go into the mountains to visit the bee swarm has been delayed. When a woman is too idle and starts to think wildly, this is a very dangerous omen. And if this woman holds power, it is often easy to cause big trouble. The same goes for bees. Out of boredom, the queen actually came up with the idea of expanding her territory, turning her longing for Su Ming into the motivation to expand her tribe's territory. In its simple mind, a very simple idea came up: since the bee swarm can provide honey and help Su-ming, then by expanding the bee swarm territory and bringing more bee swarms under its command, more bees can be produced. Honey will help Su-ming better. Thus, a vigorous battle began. There were originally 12 swarms of indigenous bees in the valley. The smallest group among them was larger in number than the queen bee. However, the individual combat effectiveness and team combat effectiveness of the bees led by the queen bee exceeded that of the indigenous bees, not to mention the larger group. Fierce wasp thugs. In the early days of the war, the queen bee's team caught the natives off guard and annexed 2 small tribes in succession. As a result, this time it caused public outrage. Honeys have low intelligence, cannot think, and have no guts in their stomachs. Precisely because of this, they have an innate and accurate intuition about danger. The behavior of this group of alien bees made the remaining indigenous groups in the entire valley feel a huge threat, and they decided to join forces to completely eliminate this group of alien invaders. The remaining 10 swarms of bees joined forces, and their number was dozens or even hundreds of times that of the queen bee. In just 2 or 3 days, the queen bee team was beaten back step by step, causing heavy losses, not to mention the loss of all the results obtained. Even more than half of the original territory was taken away, leaving only this small forest as a base, struggling to resist the indigenous coalition forces. Fortunately, the indigenous coalition did not have a commander like Su-ming, so they only acted on instinct. After achieving a good situation, they did not destroy the Soviet army in one go. Instead, they sent a large swarm of bees to attack the grove every day. Sometimes more were sent, sometimes less. At the least, the number of enemy troops was 1 or 2 times greater than that of the Soviet army. Fortunately, the indigenous bees were not very intelligent, and there was no cooperation among the tribes, let alone cross-communal groups have joined forces to fight, and at the same time, the queen bee has a large group of wasps, which can be used as a surprise soldier at critical moments. This is how they can barely survive until today, and the number is decreasing every day. So, it's all my fault. It's my indifference and lack of care that led to today's situation. Su-ming pointed to his nose and asked the queen bee. The queen bee didn't dare to say anything, so she acquiesced. You. Since the fight has started, why didn't you notify me earlier? Su-ming was a little annoyed. Since the war had already started, the queen bee should have notified him earlier. If he had known that a war of genocide was going on in the valley, he would have put down his work and asked for 2 days off to come here. The queen bee's mental power was filled with hesitation, as if she was afraid of being punished by Su-ming. She had provoked the war, and if she won, of course there would be no problem, but now she was passively beaten and suffered heavy losses. She didn't seem to dare to ask Su-ming for help, fearing that Su-ming would punish her. Or, she was worried that Su-ming, who had rarely met, would alienate her because of this incident. Su-ming almost laughed at her. Oh my God, you are not a real woman, can't you be so delicate? Sister, as the queen bee, shouldn't you have the domineering power of the mother of the world? You are making me very scared. What if you really have human wisdom in a few years, won't I be killed by your resentful aura? Super Zoo. Author, Yin Se Nian Bai. Chapter 110. Su-ming was speechless about the queen bee's feminine thoughts. Different animals have different personalities. He could understand the personalities of bears, wolves, and even 2 parrots. But the queen bee became such a resentful woman. Su-ming felt a chill. What's this? Sister, you are just a bee. Do you want me to date you all day long? Even if you have a good figure and a thin waist and a big butt, Nangongyan's figure is not bad either. What's more, she has 2 big white steamed buns on her chest. As the saying goes, you can chew them when you are hungry, have juice when you are thirsty, and warm your hands when you are cold. Sister, you are a bee. Even if I am willing to date you, there is no way to fix this. Do you want me to explode you? What a disgusting one. Su Ming felt a chill. Forget it, I won't pursue the responsibility, just cause trouble, I'll end it for you. Next time you have any action, report to me first. Queen Bee. Now is not the time to discuss who is right and who is wrong. In fact, there is no right or wrong in the war between animals. The love between humans and animals, damn it, I said I won't talk about this. The key is that the queen bee is Su Ming's subordinate. Even if it is wrong, Su Ming doesn't want to blame it for anything. As the saying goes, you can't help your relatives, and you can't turn your elbow outward even if you are beaten to death. The key at the moment is how to win this battle. My queen bee has completely offended the queen bees of other bee colonies in Beiwa Valley, and she has offended them very badly. Although women are narrow-minded and vengeful, this matter has little to do with gender. From a biological point of view, the queen bee is the mother of the entire bee colony and the supreme ruler. Each bee colony can only have one queen bee. When two bee colonies merge and become one of the two previous queen bees must be killed. There can't be two tigers in one mountain, and there can't be two queens in one family, huh? Anyway, since the war has started and both sides have fought their brains out, the queen bee under his command and the other indigenous queen bees are naturally opposed and life and death. Either the queen bees of the remaining 9 races die, or the Soviet queen bee dies, otherwise the war will never end. If Su Ming has to choose, of course, there is no suspense to let the other 9 queen bees die. Su Ming guessed whether there is a relatively simple way to solve the problem, such as using mental power to forcibly control other queen bees and bring their colonies under his command. Let's not talk about whether it can be done. Even if it is done, there will be 2 huge hidden dangers. First, if the original queen bee still exists, then the bee colonies under it will not truly merge with another bee colony. In the future, the dozen or so bee colonies will still be scattered and independent, and nominally ruled by Su Ming. Second, and the most troublesome point, this big queen bee has developed intelligence because of her mental power, so other queen bees, after being in contact with mental power for a long time, will also develop intelligence and learn to think simply. Perhaps because the queen bee is a female, her thoughts are very complicated. A thinking female queen bee is enough to give Su Ming a headache. If there are more than a dozen thinking female queen bees in the future, and there will be constant grievances and hatreds between them, then Su Ming will be annoyed to death. Furthermore, what if those dozen queen bees all want to fall in love with him, and they are more than a dozen queen bees with different temperaments? Will they fight again because of jealousy or something strange? Will they not be content until they pull out the other party's intestines and smash their brains into a wall? Why is this happening? Is being too attractive a sin? Su Ming looked up to the sky and cried out, I run a zoo, not an emperor, I don't need palace fighting or anything like that. After a little consideration, Su Ming showed his bold style of big monster and decided to solve the problem once and for all, killing all the queen bees in other populations to save future troubles. I never understand the concept of being gentle and kind to women. What I love is to be ruthless and domineering, wow ha 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 ha. The queen bee immediately felt a burst of joy and excitement, twisting her slender and plump hips to Su Ming, with a kind of cruelty flashing in her compound eyes, like an accomplice. So cruel. So cruel. So vicious. So vicious. 2 macaws jumped around on the side, making noises non-stop, and were pinched by Su Ming's mouth. Wind stuck me, wind stuck me. The parrots shook their heads and tried to fight for Su Ming's claws. If you dare to talk nonsense again, I will send you 2 to be the vanguard, Su Ming threatened them fiercely. The 2 macaws dared not speak immediately. Although they just killed all the native bees and made the native bee colonies unable to fight back, that was because the bee colonies attacking today were only a small part of the coalition forces, and they had the advantage of home court. They had the Soviet bees in front, the Saker falcon in the middle, and Su Ming's help in the back, so they were able to enter the empty field and achieve brilliant results. If they were allowed to rush to the coalition home court alone and face the remaining 10 groups of coalition bees, these two guys would not be able to resist even if they were twice as fierce, and they would be skinned alive if they didn't die. How many native coalition forces are there? The queen bee couldn't tell the exact number. Up to now, the other side had not sent out all its troops at once. If this happened, the Soviet army would have been completely wiped out. So Su Ming only got a very general number. Among the remaining 10 groups of bees, the smallest group was about 5 times the number of Soviet troops. Of course, it was the Soviet army that was fully organized at the beginning, not the Soviet army that had lost 30% of its personnel now. The largest group was more than 15 times the number of Soviet troops. The bee army that was repelled today was only a small part of the coalition forces. Oh my God, this time I really have to fight 100 alone. Even Su Ming was a little shocked. What kind of concept is that? Thousands of thousands are not enough to describe it. I'm afraid there are hundreds of thousands. With so many bees gathered together, even the Saker falcon and the macaw would have no way to deal with them. Although they have thick feathers to protect them from bee stings, their physical strength is limited. As long as the coalition forces divide a part of them, they can tire them to death. In front of this number of bees, Su Ming's current mental power can't play a big role. Controlling hundreds or even thousands of them at a time is useless. It won't take long before they will be overwhelmed by the army of bees. There was not much combat power available on his side. After days of fighting, the Soviet bees not only suffered heavy casualties, but the soldiers were also very tired. Some of them could hardly fly and lay on the grass to rest. Forcing them to fight would be tantamount to sending them to death. Moreover, Su Ming's side had a fatal weakness.